Chapter 18 is the last chapter we'll be studying in this course. It again is another very detailed chapter where we deal with the auditor's report. As we go through this chapter, we want to pay particular attention to the details. There are so many questions about the auditor's report on the final exam that hinge upon specific details. Beginning on page 612, we get our first exposure to the unqualified audit report. You should be able to identify each paragraph purpose, why it's in there. You don't need to memorize the report, but if I say, what is the purpose of the third paragraph, you should be able to identify that. When we move on to the standard unmodified report for all entities other than public companies, you don't need to focus on that per se. When we move on to page 615, we start to see modifications and all the other scenarios, going concern, lack of consistency, summarized on page 616, the different scenarios. You do need to know how each of those scenarios affects the wording of the audit report. You don't need to memorize the change, but you do need to understand what the change is. The one thing I would memorize for certain in this chapter is the figure on page 621. It goes through all the different scenarios on how you'll decide which audit report to ultimately issue. It's an easy to memorize figure and helps really summarize a lot of the chapter. You do need to know, for example, what the scope limitations are, statements not in conformity with GAAP, auditor's report. I'm looking at page 625. When you look at Exhibit 8-7 and 8-8, I would read it once, but I wouldn't read it multiple times as I don't expect there's going to be a great return on time. When we talk about the special reporting issues, I wouldn't spend a lot of time. I would review it once. That starts on page 625 and continues to 628. Other information, just be aware of the auditor's responsibility. Don't read that into detail. And you can ignore the special reports. That concludes the textbook on page 631. Have a great time.